recording. So this is an iterative thing from our class on Wednesday. We were getting to the end of our incident handling concepts review. And our goal today is to do as much of that and to see if we can't take care of ethics quickly and efficiently. And so one of the things that is supposed to happen that almost never happens is, as we concluded our class on Wednesday, post-incident activity, lessons learned, people don't like facing their challenges, especially if they had to struggle to clear a challenge. So if you have a cyber incident and everybody's scrambling to finish the cyber incident, the last thing they want to do is get out a microscope and see who did what or could do what better. That's often awkward, but it's a critical part. And I want you to notice the size of the arrow here, okay? So there's some intentional things with this graphic that we didn't point out at the close of our session on Wednesday. But when you finish the containment, eradication, and recovery, so you contain the runaway freight train. Everybody understand what I'm talking about? If you have a malware that's breaking out, maybe ransomware, the first thing you do is halt the malware, the spread of the malware. That's the first interest in this stage of the incident response life cycle. The next thing you do is eradicate. You remove and eradicate the nasty. And that's difficult because at sometimes what you're going to learn soon is that, especially in those, if you have a system that has been afflicted with malware, you can remove the malware, but that doesn't mean the damage is gone. So what am I saying? It's like cancer. You can stop the cancer, but that doesn't mean you can get what the cancer already destroyed back. Does that make sense? So if the cancer destroys a couple of your organs, that's really hard. I mean, you might survive with a transplant, but the point is, you stop the cancer, that's one thing. Getting the damage back, that's when you eradicate it, you remove the cancer, but then recovery is getting back where the damage is. And more importantly, recovery has to do with changing your settings so that this thing doesn't jump right back on you. You'd be shocked at how often somebody cleans up a system and then they connect the system and it jumps right back on because they've had a back door or they have something else. So the first step in when you're actually engaging an incident and you're trying to get a handle on it before it becomes a crisis, because if it becomes a crisis, now you've flipped a different gear, you're in crisis management mode, right? And that's a whole different wheelhouse. You contain the issue, then you eradicate or remove the issue, then you recover from the issue. That means you get back, if you can. If you have tattooed this thing right here, what am I referring to here? Oh, no, not that. My bad. What is this right here? What are you looking at right now? This is the registry. Thank you, Milan. This is the registry of a Windows machine. And oftentimes when a malicious exploit has had its effect, it tattoos the registry. That word is an intentional, and it's actually an industry standard. If you tattoo the registry, it means, okay, I've removed the malware, but that doesn't mean the damage is gone. That registry is still fricasseed. It's still scrambled, right? Or tattooed. The idea is to, when you're recovering, to recoup the registry. Now, if you have irreparable registry damage, what's your only recourse for recovery, true recovery? I'm going to put this on the assessment and on the cumulative and on the final. If the registry is damaged beyond your ability to manually correct, what is your only recourse to recover the registry? Suleiman said, strip the metal down, strip the machine down to metal and reload the machine. How many of you agree with that? Does that?
That would be the same as like factory reset.
Mm-hmm. Or factory reset would be another way to put it. Yeah.
I would think either that or just get a new system.
Yes. Milan said it's also the same as factory reset or get a new system. So yeah, if you scramble the registry and it's damaged beyond your ability to reconstitute, there are registry repair tools. I mean, there's all sorts of elegant stuff. The question is whether or not the system is going to be stable after you try to. This is like a combination of heart and lungs and brain and spinal cord. I mean, the registry is an incredibly sensitive. It's like the central repository of all the vital organs of Windows that are accessible to a user, right? Now, there are some things that run under the hood in the kernel that you learn about in the CSC 410 operating system class, but basically, if you scramble this, recovery means rebuild from bare metal or replace the machine, right? Or go back to a factory reset if you have an image. Here's the factory load. We captured the load on these machines when they were shipped from the factory. Oftentimes, the factory reset is not an ideal option because when a machine is in use for 18 months, 2 years, the moment you reset to factory, it goes back in time 18 months to 2 years, and then you have to run all these updates over the last 18 months to 2 years. So there's additional downtime with the use of a factory reset. However, it is often the most practical and available option to rebuild a machine. So a lot of times people find themselves kind of cornered and they're like, okay, yeah, it's time to buy a new machine, which is scary. The number of, so recovery means buying a new machine. It's scary how often people reach that conclusion because they don't have the time or the energy or the will to rebuild. You had a question or comment, Salim?
Yeah, so if you shut it down with your now, can't you load it up, like load the OS with its update?
All right, so Sulaiman asked an excellent question. He said, if you wipe it to bare metal, can't you load a new system image that includes the updates? And the short answer is yes. You can use a most recent build of the operating system, which is released every 6 months to a year. So if 2 or 3 years have lapsed, don't use the 2-year-old factory image, right? The other thing you can do is you can take the latest updates and embed them in the install image. It's called slipstream. Everyone, slipstream. So if you slipstream the updates into your install image, you don't have to load those. We actually teach that in CSC 255. So it's in operating system deployment best practices. We actually show students how to embed those updates inside the ISO so that you don't have to load those all the time. There's also a kind of a manual method. You can download the updates onto a thumb drive using the Microsoft software. It's the Microsoft Update Catalog, I think. Have we covered this in here? And this is actually pretty cool. So I love showing this. So this is the Microsoft Update Catalog, and if I go in here, and I just updated my machine yesterday and had a huge problem with my networking when I was updating. Well, let me go here. System about. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
So see, I'm on 2130. You should be on 2130 at this point. If you're not, you're out of date. Unless you're in Windows 11, in which case there's another build altogether. Now, let's pretend that I need to load a bunch of updates for machines and I don't have the updated ISO and I don't have a Windows software update server. WSUS, kind of a funny acronym. It's free if you get a server license, and each of you have access to server Windows on the Microsoft downloads. You can set up a Windows software updates server and it pre-stores or caches all of the updates for the local network. Put another way, when a major release like yesterday rolls out and it's 400 megabytes large, how many machines do we have on this campus conservatively and over on the other campus? Probably 600 machines altogether. Okay. So 600 times 400 megabytes. Let's just do a little math here. Okay. 600 times 400, and this is megabytes, right? 400 megabytes. Now I'm going to multiply by 8 because those bytes are actually bits. When we're transmitting files across a network, we're not transmitting bytes. The speed, 100 megabit, it's in bits, it's not bytes. And most people think, oh, I have gigabit. That's bits. That's 125 megabytes per second. A gigabit line is a 125 megabyte connection to the internet. A lot of people confuse that. I'm going to multiply by what? 8. Okay. So what is that? That's 600, I'm going to do that again. 600 bytes, no, 600 machines times 400 megabytes times 8. Now, those are megabytes. So in order to do this properly, I have to multiply by 1024 and then 1024 again. Are you ready? Are you ready? Times 1024 times 1024. That's billion right there. This is trillion. A 400 megabyte cumulative update for a month requires the transmission on UVI network of 2,013,265,920,000 bits. Dang, I'm just saying. So no kidding, the network was slow. Okay, now, what would I advise? UVI, it would be a good investment, and they may have this already. You need a Windows software update server, WSUS. It's free. It's a role you can configure. It stores all of these. And here's what happens. This is coming across the internet. This has to be pulled down from Microsoft for each one of the 600 machines that are updating. Hello. That's going to flood the crap out of your 1 gigabit connection on each campus. That's right. My son has more bandwidth at his house in Summerville, South Carolina than the entire St. Thomas campus. Just saying. Okay. Now, why are we talking about this? Let's get back. Let's bring it full circle. Okay. Post-incident activity. Why didn't we have the fix that would have prevented this exposure from presenting, that would have allowed someone with the skills to use an exploit to hack this thing to ruin our lives, right? You're right here. In the post-incident activity, the reason this arrow is the biggest is because this is the piece that people miss the most often. Now, you've heard me talk about Achilles heels, right? And we said that scope was one of those Achilles heels. The post-incident activity is an Achilles heel, and that's the authors are trying to get you to realize, wait a minute, there's a big thing here that's missing. If you go back there and you say, hey, the reason that half of our systems were vulnerable and exposed is because they didn't load the update. Well, how often do you got to do updates? At least once a month, sometimes more often than once a month. That's a lot of bandwidth. So what happens is people put it off. It's too slow. Well, here's the good news. Let's say that all you have is a thumb drive. Are you ready for this? All I have is a thumb drive. I'm going to go back to my updates. And does everybody see this update history right here? If you update history. Everybody see update history on my screen? So here's the cumulative update for Windows 10, one of the last ones that just rolled out. Did you notice there's a date associated with this thing? And more importantly, a knowledge base article number 5018410. KB, always precede the number with the letters KB, knowledge base. 5018410. 5018410. Everybody repeat with me. 5018410. 5018410. I go to the Microsoft Update Catalog. Oh, look, for each of the versions of Windows, I can download the, oh, I was mistaken. It wasn't 400 megabytes. It was what? 683 megabytes, almost 700 megabytes for the cumulative update in October, right? And that's just the monthly update. That's not a feature release that completely replaces the kernel entirely, right? So what do we do to make this simple? Set up a Windows software update server on your local network. Why? Because it's not pulling from the internet. It's pulling at wire speeds. It's not, you're not using wireless. You're not using the internet. Those are slower. When you connect a Windows software update server, all of your Office machines are wire connected. Those load 1,000 times faster. 1,000 times faster. Which means the load is done and people just reboot their machine and it's blink that quick. Now, if you don't have a server, you have a thumb drive. What can you do with the thumb drive? Download the cumulative update. When you download one of these for your version of Windows, you can walk around from machine to machine, drop it into a temp folder, double click it, and it'll load out of the hard disk in the blink of an eye. And then you reboot your system and you're done. You could set up a file share that would do the same thing across the network, a primitive version of Windows Software Update Server. But this would rapidly expedite and decrease exposures, right? Now, 9 times out of 10, when people are doing their post-incident activity, you would be amazed at how 2 out of 3 times, some kind of update or patch or fix was not done. A majority of the time we have problems, it's because we did not patch the stupid thing when we could have, right? So what's the preparation piece? Oh, you spend some time doing this, or you'll spend a lot more time where? In the registry, trying to dig out, trying to rebuild things, and that sucks. Any questions on incident handling? Right. How many of you knew about, oh, I can put this on a USB drive and just share it with everybody?
I knew part of that when you helped me redo my old laptop when it was messing up.
Yes. And this, by the way, is also, see the knowledge base, see that's how the KB references. So if I find the cumulative update for Windows 10 version 21H2 for x86 for ARM, that's Mac, and that's a Mac system right here, ARM 64, or it's a RISC-based system. The x64 right here is what we're looking for. So you just gotta basically pick the right one. You'll notice that some of these are geared for Europe. How do you know they're geared for Europe? Everybody see GDR? I think that means general data requirements or protections. There's a, like, I hope that's right. I'm going to research that. But basically, or no, that might have to do with the image release for Microsoft. Those probably mean something else. But you do have different flavors of Windows based on the environment. You have Windows 10 in Europe. That's a different version of Windows 10 than Windows 10 in the US. I hope you know that. British version of Windows 10 is not the same as the US English version of Windows 10. Everybody knows this, right? Yeah, it's a little different. Language packs, they have different language packs. So what you want to do is research and make sure you're getting the right thing. The LTSB version means long-term support. If you're using in a corporate environment, if you're using Windows and you're in a subscription license, then they'll stand with a certain version longer than others. So this is another thing to watch out for. All right, I'm going to get back to where we needed to be here. Any questions about the big arrow? And how this is where a lot of cybersecurity problems woulda, coulda, should have been prevented and didn't. Scope, a lot of incident handling issues, right? So the cybersecurity framework, we've heard the term framework and blueprint before, yes? Okay.
Yes.
So we have this thing that is commonly referred to as an attack chain. When malicious adversaries are intending your doom, they tend to pursue a specific set of actions in a specific order, right? They try to sneak around your network and figure out where the holes are, and then they try to exploit those holes and so on. Now, I'm oversimplifying here, but in terms of your purposes, when you're looking at incident handling, it's important to understand how this incident handling is a component that supports a healthy cybersecurity program. And NIST, instead of using the word blueprint, they use the word framework, okay? But you'll notice how these elements of incident handling are embedded inside the framework, right? What are we saying? You can't have a cybersecurity framework without the components of incident handling being embedded inside there. So you have to be able to detect when something's going wrong, and then be able to respond to it, and then be able to recover, right? But ultimately, you have to cycle back to the identify, protect, and refinement piece. Now, there's all sorts of policies. We're not going to get into that right now, but basically, if you want a complete breakout and guideline for how best to have an incident handling policy, this is where you go, 800-61. So if you want to do better with incident handling, go to NIST and look up 800-61 revision 2. There could be a revision 3 out. What did I recommend Wednesday? Every time you see one of these, where should you go? Google, get it, look at it, okay? Incident response planning. So of course you have policy, right? You have a program, and then you have planning on how you're gonna, that's part of the contingency. If you don't have a plan on who's gonna respond first to what, then you have a Chinese fire drill. Case in point, what happened last Friday when we walked through the network outage on campus here, right? There's a long series of widening impacted users, and then the tech staff is trying to play catch up to figure out, okay, what's going on, and then who do we call, where do we call, and it just takes too long. If you have a plan in place and you see certain things on the help desk, you can pick up the phone, send a text message with a certain code, and somebody will stop what they're doing, and you get recovery in 5 minutes. So planning can be very sophisticated, and there are all sorts of components to the planning. I'm not going to take the time to read this to you outright. But the thing to understand is that everything you need to know about incident handling planning is in 800-61. That's the main thing. Incident response actions can be organized into 3 basic phases. This is what you saw in the diagram. Detection, reaction, and recovery. Those are the main phases. Okay? So you detect. Has anyone ever heard of an intrusion detection system? IDS. You have an appliance that is exclusively devoted to detecting an intrusion. Those, there's an overdependence on those. People just buy an IDS appliance, they plug it into their network, and they go, okay, we're good. We'll know if somebody's trying to intrude. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. reaction and recovery. So here's a checklist, a handy dandy checklist provided by NIST for incident handling, right? Checklists are really ideal when the pressure is on. So that's just something to understand. Data protection in preparation for incidents. Now everybody see the word here, backup? So, and then right here, 3-2-1 backup rule. Everyone see this? 3 copies of important data on at least 2 different media with at least 1 copy stored offsite. That's what 3-2-1 means. I have 3 copies of my most important. People grab a backup on a thumb drive and they think they're done. Or they grab a backup on an external hard drive and they think they're done. No, you're not. If you have important data, you need 3 copies of it on 2 different kinds of media, and one of them has to be offsite. Okay? Any questions about that?
What do you mean by 2 different types of media?
The question was asked, what do you mean by 2 different types of media? That's a good question. Let's pretend that we have a backup server and it has a big disk array, like a NAS. Are you with me? Okay. And let's say that you have the original data. Is the original data part of the 3? Read the line. Can I count the original data as one of the 3? Why not?
Because it's not a copy of it.
It says
In
3.
order for it to be a backup, it needs to be a copy of it.
That's right. It says copies. 3 copies. Originals don't count. So people say, well, I have the original data on my server. No, that doesn't count. You have to have 3 copies. So let's say you have a NAS and that's your primary method of backup. And it's disk to disk and it's very fast and it's over the network. And there's a fast gigabit Ethernet recovery option, right? So you can rebuild a server, rebuild a directory and all that kind of stuff very fast. That's one type of media. Now let's say that you also have a tape drive, cartridge tapes. You can keep up to 1 terabyte of data, I mean a huge amount of data, compressed on a single tape. It just takes a long time to run. So it might run overnight and it might be all the data in your data center and it'll fit on a single cartridge. You can put that in a briefcase and have somebody store it off site, right? So that's a different kind of media. You could make a backup with an external hard drive. That's kind of like, that's almost like the same kind of media. Why is different media important? Well, one type of media is usually vulnerable to specific kinds of events. Has anyone ever heard of a solar flare or an electromagnetic pulse? So you could have traditional disk media and it's extremely sensitive to electromagnetic pulse attacks, and that would take out your disk array. But if you had it in a USB drive that was protected inside a static envelope, right, then the pulse wouldn't affect it. And that's different kinds of media. So that's solid state media. So a solid state drive would be a different type of media, or magnetic tape. Or they have this thing called write once, read many, a worm drive. It's like a DVD-R recorder, right? So you write once to it and then you can read from it many times. So you have optical. Recommendations also include daily on-site backups and weekly off-site backups. So what do we mean by weekly off-site? You perform daily backups on campus servers. But once a week, you should push a backup somewhere else to a data center at a different location, not on campus. That's what they mean by off-site backups. Okay. Now you could create a backup, put it in a briefcase and roll it to a safety box, you know. So once a week you do that and put something off-site. Now there's all sorts, there's an entire industry devoted to data protection. And you have all these ideas of electronic vaulting, remote journaling, database shadowing. These are redundant. All of those terms basically talk about extra copies of a thing, redundant copies of a thing. Any questions?
Would cloud backup be an option?
Would what kind of option?
Cloud, using the cloud to back up information.
Yes. However, a cloud backup has one downside. Usually when you have a disaster hit, your internet access is also taken down. So a cloud backup would not be useful in the event of a disaster as opposed to a cyber incident, right? Now, if the cyber incident also took out your internet network, right? The back pipe to the internet, if a cyber attack took out your network connection to the internet, you'd also be screwed. So yes, you can back up to the cloud, but if you back up to local disk, that's 1,000 times faster than backing up to an external disk. An external disk and the local disk are, it's a rule of 1,000s. Basically, every time you move a level up with the distance from the site, if you go to cloud, that's 1,000 times slower than a local network backup. A local network backup is 1,000 times slower than a local disk backup. Does that make sense? So you have a disk array on the same server. So yes, you can do cloud backup, and thank you for asking about that. So detecting incidents, a lot of that has to do with watching for logs. Here's one thing that I want to tell you about incidents when it comes to incident handling. If you don't set the log to watch for a specific event, you won't have a log to detect the incident. Let me repeat that. Let's pretend that you don't care whether or not failed attempts at logins should be logged. When someone tries to enter a wrong password over and over and over again, will that be logged in your system log or your security log if you don't enable that? It's not a trick
What
question.
if you don't enable it?
Yeah, if it's not enabled, it's not going to work. And that's, believe it or not, a lot of logs will not log system events unless you say, okay, I want to watch for this. Is it a good idea to watch for failed attempts at a login?
Yes.
How about failed remote attempts at a login?
Yeah.
There's a difference between logging in on the system directly and a remote login. Huge difference, right? So those are things that you have to do. When you're detecting incidents, you're dealing with logs. The logs have to be configured to capture a specific type of event. This is where the challenge is. And a lot of people don't do that legwork up front. They just buy a big appliance and they say, okay, and they expect the appliance to tell them. And depending on the intrusion detection system, it may not work, okay? So these are huge challenges. Incident indicators. Now this is almost comical. I want to say this is comical because I've seen people do this, where they go into the registry and they go into HKey local machine. Where is that? Current version. There it is. Profile list. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So in order to get to this place inside your registry, you start off at the top, and then every time you expand, I expanded local machine, then I expanded software, then I expanded Microsoft, Windows NT, current version, and profile list. And every time I did that, I got down to here. Now, when I click on this, you'll notice I don't see as much detail over here. I see some detail over here, but I have 3 accounts on my machine. These 3 are included with a Windows login. But basically, I've seen cases where you open the profile list and there's 10 or 12 profiles, user profiles. I know I have 3 accounts. When I go into my settings and I look at my users, right? If I go back to my home here, I go to accounts and I go to family and other, I have the main owner account, but then I have 2 other accounts that I use. So I have 3 accounts. If I go into my profile list and I see more than 1, 2, 3, look, here it says what? Everybody see that? Owner. What about this one? When connected. EFS trial. Where did I see that? Oh, when connected, EFS trial, and my original account is owner, right? That's one area where you see extras. Here's another area where you see extras. And this is, everybody remembers doing something with their user. Didn't we ask you to go into the user directory? Here's another place where you find it. Default is the default profile they use. It's a cookie cutter. It has my documents, my videos, my music, my photos, all that kind of stuff, right? And when you create a new user, it takes a copy of default and then it uses that to build the new user file structure, the file system for the user profile. If you alter the default and you create new users after that, they all take on that unique configuration. Let me repeat that. If you alter the default profile and then create new users after that, you have a lot less work, because if you want to reorganize a user profile to be supported more easily, you can do that. And then as users join or they're created on a system, they all take on that characteristic. The public one is the one that's shared. That's default. So default and public are standard user profiles. The other 3, if you're in here and you see extras, that's bad, right? That's bad. So incident indicators. Another incident indicator would be, my system is really slow. Can anyone think of another incident indicator? Let's just do a little brainstorming. You've all seen a hosed system, a bad, whacked, infected, mangled system. What other indicators have you witnessed firsthand from that?
Apps opening that you didn't necessarily click.
Yeah, auto opening acts. It's like, why does this keep opening? I didn't install this app. What the hell is it doing running down here, right? Can everybody see unusual consumption of computing resources? So if you go into Task Manager and you're not running anything, but more than half of your RAM is consumed, hello, why is half of your RAM utilized? And you don't have anything open. How about your network? If you had, here's one thing that you got to see that's huge. Has anyone ever heard of a botnet? A zombie, an infected computer, and it's called a bot. Also, it's referred to as a bot. So when something is infected, it becomes a bot. People control the bots. They control the zombies from a distance, remotely, thousands of them. And then they say, attack Milan, because he was messing with my girlfriend. So attack Milan, right? And then all of a sudden 1,000 machines are doing what? Their network card turns into a fire hose. The upstream traffic, if you see large volumes of upstream traffic from a machine, I guarantee it is infected. Large upstream traffic, or it's part of the dark web and it's helping serve up thousands of copies of the latest Marvel superhero movie that was recorded in a theater yesterday afternoon in the St. Croix movie theater over here using a high definition smartphone. And then it was rendered and they did other things with it, right? And they pushed it out on there. And then you used a BitTorrent client or something like that. You wanted to participate in something called Tor, the onion ring. That's part of the dark web. You want to push all those movie copies out through the dark web, and you don't want your name associated. Why? Because the FBI will come and lock you up, because the movie folks want them to buy they want folks to buy it online, streaming, right? With their prime or their, everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? I'm just getting these glassy looks. That doesn't mean you guys have been doing this on the side and I'm talking up this stuff in the class and you're like, oh, no, it couldn't mean that. All right, the thing I'm talking about here is you're gonna have huge amounts of upstream traffic. That is a problem. If you notice what's going on in your network and flooded outbound, watch out. Find the machines that are flooding it outbound. I guarantee you, if you walk up to them, this is fun actually. Watch this. So I'm gonna go live here for just a second, right? We still have people from St. Thomas, yeah, in the mix. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
I want you to pretend that all around me is an invisible network with invisible machines, and they're all floating in the air and they're all connected through wireless or through cables. Okay. And oh my gosh, nobody can do anything. And when they click and they try to enter things into their email or in a Google prompt, it's terribly slow. And what you find out is that all the upstream traffic out to the internet is clogged. It's flooded, right? This is a neat trick. You take a simple network tool and you find out which machines are flooding the upstream side of the traffic. And you walk up to them, bling, clip, cut, right? Power them off, pull the power plug. Just walk right up to them and whoop. Now, if it's a server you have to have, that would be a problem. But pull, air gap the connections. Just walk around and start yanking cords. And if you can't yank the data cord, yank the power cord. What you're going to see is, oh, a quarter of the upstream traffic just got better. A half of the upstream traffic just came back. Oh, 3/4 of the upstream traffic. We had 4 guys in a dormitory. This is no lie. They got infected on a porn site. And those 4 guys hosed 200 internet connections for 200 dorm rooms on my former campus. And all we had to do was find, okay, which one of these yahoos has all this upstream traffic? And it was hilarious because we sent 4 guys from the help desk. And they came and knocked on the door and they're like, we have an emergency, we need to do something. And they're like, yeah, no. So when they fling open the door because nobody's answering and the resident assistant wants to know, hey, we have a situation, we need to come in, are you decent? They fling the door open. It's almost a telltale sign when people instantly shut the lid of their laptop. That's not a good sign. When people walk in the room or they pop their head in the room and somebody goes, oh, yeah, oh, can I help you? Can I help you? Yeah, okay, like that, right? And what they did was they walked over to these systems and they said, we got to do something with your cord. And they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Boom, pulled the plug. We were on walkie-talkies, right? 1 down, 2 down, 3 down, 4 down. All right, what's our status? 196 dorm rooms are fine again. I'm not making this up. True story, right? Unusual consumption of computing resources can happen on a network level. It can also happen on the system level. Just be sure that you understand that, okay? All right, let's see if we can blast through the end of this part and then we can talk about ethics and law on Monday and then we can get our hands in it. So, which of these is not a definite indicator that an event is an incident? Do we have one? No, yeah, all right. Which do you think would be is not a definite indicator that you have an incident going on? If you found hacker tools on a system, would that be an indication that somebody's probably on that system doing something they're not supposed to?
Would it be
Say again? So somebody.
Use of dormant accounts.
All right. The other comment was what now?
It's A.
A, use of dormant accounts. B, unusual system crashes. Well, heck, you could have unusual system crashes just because there's bad software loaded on it. Changes to logs, presence of hacker tools. I think B, because system crashes can happen without that stuff. But if you use a dormant account that's never been used and all of a sudden it's in use and you don't know who's using it, all right, that's one. Changes to logs. Who writes over the logs? If the logs are being washed or edited, that's a bad sign. Somebody's trying to cover their tracks or the presence of hacker tools, right? Now, again, in Suleiman's house, he has hacker tools. So, and his system never crashes. Unusual system crashes. You can have unusual system crashes just because it isn't patched and updated. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Okay. All right, we're going to stop here, and I hope all of you have a good weekend, and I will be grading everything else, or I don't come out of my I don't come out of my office this weekend. So thank you for your patience, and we'll talk to you Monday. Any questions before we clear?
I just wanted to let you know that I emailed you the assignments that you wanted me to email you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.